The fighting around Bastogne has reduced Easy Company to a thin and exhausted line. Men are taking ground in one position and losing it in another, and now they are digging in along the edge of a forest under sporadic artillery fire. There is no proper aid station, food and winter clothing are running short, ammunition is scarce, and the perimeter has become so stretched that enemy soldiers can move into command post areas. The men simply do not have enough strength to cover the line. Captain Nixon reports that he walked the perimeter during the early hours of the morning and could not even find the 501st on the right flank. There are considerable gaps in the defensive line, but there are not enough men to close them. General McAuliffe orders the line held and the gaps closed. The heavy fog means there will be no useful air cover, while the Germans continue to bring pressure from every direction. The 1st Battalion has been driven out of Foy with heavy casualties, and tanks and artillery are moving into the area with little support available beyond Bastogne. For Eugene Rowe, the situation is becoming increasingly desperate. He is trying to keep wounded men alive with almost nothing to work with. His supplies consist of a few bandages and virtually no morphine or plasma. He attempts to reach 3rd Battalion for more supplies but loses his way in the darkness and confusion. When he finally returns, he is told to take everything he can get because he is going to need it. The medical situation is so poor that 2 medics have been forced to share the same foxhole. Their commanding officers worry about what will happen if one of them is hit. Rowe is also reminded that he is positioned dangerously close to the front line. Elsewhere, men are asking him for morphine, while admitting that their wounds and illnesses are becoming harder to endure. Joe Toy is suffering badly from the cold and has lost his boots, while other men are dealing with trench foot, painful urination, and the effects of constant exposure to freezing conditions. Rowe moves from foxhole to foxhole looking for supplies. He searches for sharp scissors, additional morphine syringes, and anything else that might help him treat the wounded. The men hide whatever medical supplies they have because everyone knows there may be no replacements. Muck and Malarkey come under fire, their helmets peppered by enemy rounds, and Rowe is repeatedly called toward the wounded. Pencala is hit and immediately begins worrying about the wound. Rowe examines him and discovers that the injury is not as catastrophic as Pencala believes, but the soldier is determined not to leave the line. He insists that he does not need an aid station, and Rowe can only point out the grim irony that there is no proper aid station to send him to anyway. Rowe sends men toward 3rd Battalion in search of bandages, plasma, food, and the desperately needed scissors. The journey is dangerous, and when they reach another medical position, they find that supplies are almost non-existent there as well. They can spare only a few bandages and have no morphine. They are told to return to Bastogne for plasma, but there is no surgeon and no real medical organization to rely on. Back with the company, the men try to maintain some sense of normal life despite the conditions. They joke about food, replacements, and the absurdity of their situation. Malarkey and the others use humor to deal with the cold and fear, even though everyone understands how precarious their position has become. Rowe continues searching for medical supplies. Lieutenant Dyke has a full aid kit, and although he initially worries about what will happen if he is wounded, he eventually gives Rowe some of his morphine syringes. Other soldiers contribute what they can. A few supplies have been secretly gathered by the platoons, and every bandage and syringe becomes valuable. Rowe is also warned to check on Joe Toy, who is serving on an observation post without proper footwear. Toy has taken off his boots to dry his socks, only to have the boots destroyed by enemy fire. He is now moving around in bare feet. Rowe examines his feet and warns him that he is developing trench foot. If the condition becomes severe and turns gangrenous, Toy could lose the foot. Toy refuses to leave the line, so Rowe tells him that he must keep his feet dry, massage them, change his socks every day, and dry the wet ones. The cold, hunger, and constant artillery fire are beginning to affect everyone. Even simple things such as hot food become objects of longing. The men talk about home while they remain surrounded by enemy forces. For Rowe, however, the immediate concern remains the wounded. A wounded soldier named Sisk is brought in after being hit in the leg. Rowe examines the injury and begins treating him while others search for a jeep. Sisk refuses morphine because he knows how scarce it is and insists that he can endure the pain. The men work together to get him out, but every movement is dangerous because the enemy continues to fire on their positions. The medical situation is further complicated by the fact that German forces have captured the 326th Medical Battalion. Doctors, medics, and other medical personnel have been taken prisoner, leaving the Americans with almost nothing. Men are receiving alcohol for pain because proper medication is unavailable. Wounded soldiers continue to arrive, and the few medical workers remaining are forced to improvise. Rowe reaches a makeshift medical facility where nurses are treating casualties without the resources they need. The wounded cannot be evacuated because the American forces are cut off. The facility is effectively the end of the road. Rowe asks for morphine, bandages, and plasma, and a nurse named Renee gives him what little she can spare. Rowe discovers that there is no surgeon. Even ordinary bandages are being improvised from bed sheets. Renee introduces herself, and Rowe tells her that he is Eugene Rowe from Louisiana and is half Cajun. The two share a brief connection in the middle of the chaos. Renee helps him gather what he needs, and before he leaves, she offers him chocolate. Rowe is then given a blessing and told to fight well for God and his country. Back at the line, the men continue to endure the siege. The company is ordered to send out a reconnaissance patrol to make contact with the enemy. Rowe prepares to go along, even though he is already exhausted from treating the wounded. Before leaving, he gives his boots to Joe Toy and tells the others to make sure Toy gets them. The patrol moves forward in tactical formation. Julian, a young replacement, wants to serve as the lead scout, but he is ordered back into line. The men advance through the snow until they make contact with the German position. The patrol is immediately hit by enemy fire. One of the men goes down, and the others scramble for cover. The soldiers attempt to reach the wounded man while providing suppressing fire, but the enemy position is too strong. The patrol has made contact with the German line rather than merely an observation post, and the order is given to pull back. The men retreat under fire. Julian is left behind, wounded but apparently still alive. His comrades desperately want to go back for him, but their officers know that attempting a rescue could cost even more lives. Rowe and the others are forced to withdraw without him. The retreat leaves the men shaken. Rowe has tried to reach Julian, but cannot get to him. The loss weighs heavily on the company, particularly because Julian is so young and new to the unit. Rowe continues checking on the soldiers. He finds Toy wearing the boots he gave him and examines his feet again. The trench foot remains a serious concern, but Toy refuses to leave the front. Rowe can only continue giving him instructions to stay dry and take care of himself. Then Rowe learns that Heffron is missing from his foxhole. He searches for him and discovers the emotional cost of the fighting. Heffron is devastated by what has happened to Julian and worries that the Germans will strip the dead man's possessions. He had promised Julian that if he were killed, his belongings would be taken home to his mother. Now that promise may be impossible to keep. Rowe and Heffron speak about the Cajun tradition of the traiteurs, healers who were believed to cure illness through prayer and the laying on of hands. Rowe remembers his grandmother, who had been a traiteuse. She would pray over people and ask God to carry away their pain. Rowe admits that he is still trying to understand why he was chosen to become a medic. He has begun to feel that he has had enough of playing doctor in a war where there are more wounded than he can possibly save. The battle suddenly erupts again. Men take cover as aircraft appear overhead. For a moment, they believe the planes are attacking them, but the aircraft are C-47s carrying desperately needed supplies. The arrival of the supply drop provides a brief sense of hope, but the medical situation remains chaotic. Rowe moves among the wounded as casualties continue to arrive. He works alongside the nurses, including Renee and Anna, who has come from the Congo to help care for the wounded. The nurses are exhausted and overwhelmed. Renee admits that she never wants to treat another wounded man again and would rather work in a butcher's shop. Rowe tells her that her touch calms people, but she rejects the idea that such an ability could be a gift from God when it comes with so much pain. The medical station continues filling with casualties. Men arrive with shrapnel wounds and other serious injuries, and the nurses have to decide who can be treated first. The chaos reminds the soldiers of the devastation experienced by armies throughout history. The forests around Bastogne had once been crossed by ancient armies, and now another generation of soldiers is fighting among the same trees. Back at the company positions, the men joke with Roe when he returns. Heffron is irritated that Roe sometimes calls him by his real name, Edward, rather than his nickname. The men tease him about it, creating a small moment of normality in a situation that has become almost unbearable. The Germans begin preparing another attack. The soldiers are ordered to stay in their foxholes and hold their fire until the enemy comes close. Everyone knows that the coming fight will be intense. Smokey is hit and calls for a medic. Roe immediately moves toward him. Smokey has been badly wounded and cannot feel his legs. Roe gets plasma and tries to stabilize him while machine guns open fire around them. The position becomes too dangerous to remain in, and the men carry Smokey away under fire. Roe and the others struggle to get Smokey to safety. Even while badly wounded, Smokey remains conscious enough to worry about the fighting and the position he is leaving behind. The men hurry him out while Roe attempts to preserve the scarce plasma and keep him alive. Smokey is eventually brought to the medical position. The severity of his condition becomes clear when the men realize that he is paralyzed and cannot feel anything below the injury. Roe and the others can do little beyond treating him and trying to keep him comfortable. The days around Bastogne blur together into a continuous cycle of cold artillery, casualties, exhaustion, and survival. Yet the men continue to find small moments of comfort wherever they can. Christmas approaches, and even though they are surrounded and under constant attack, the soldiers are given a message from General McAuliffe. The message reminds the men that they have stopped the German offensive from every direction. The Germans have demanded surrender, believing the surrounded American troops are facing annihilation. McAuliffe's famous answer is read to the company, "Nuts." The men react with laughter and enthusiasm. For a few moments, the message gives them something they desperately need: the feeling that they are still holding, still fighting, and still refusing to give in. The soldiers respond with their own cries of "nuts," turning the general's defiant reply into a symbol of their resistance. Christmas brings small gifts from home and from other soldiers. Photographs of girlfriends are passed around. Some men are heartbroken to learn that relationships have ended while they have been away at war. Cigarettes appear as unexpected presents, and the men share what little they have. They joke about food, snow, and Christmas, but beneath the humor is the reality that many of them may not survive the next few days. Even their attempts to warm themselves can become dangerous. A small fire is spotted, and the men are warned that the smoke could reveal their position to the Germans. The warning comes too late. Enemy fire strikes the position, and Harry is wounded. Roe rushes to him and begins treating the injury. Harry has been hit in the hand, and although the wound is painful, Roe works quickly to stabilize him while a jeep is summoned. Roe gives Harry morphine and keeps him still while the others prepare to move him. The wounded soldier is eventually carried away, and Roe is again ordered to get himself into town for a hot meal. Even in the middle of the siege, the men know that their medic needs food and rest if he is going to continue treating them. Roe returns to the line, where the fighting and exhaustion continue. The company is still surrounded, but the men have held their positions. Every hour, they are required to report their status by radio so command knows where they are and whether they are still holding. The men continue checking on one another. Roe has become deeply embedded within the company, no longer simply the medic who moves between foxholes. He is one of them, sharing their fear, exhaustion, and humor. When Heffron is nearby, Roe calls him by his nickname, Babe, almost without realizing it. The men notice the change because it shows how much the medic has become part of the group. The siege of Bastogne has left Easy Company battered, short of supplies and exhausted, but still in the line. Their wounded have been treated with whatever could be found. Their dead have been mourned even when they could not be recovered. Their soldiers have endured freezing temperatures, artillery, German attacks, hunger, and the constant fear of being overrun. Through it all, Eugene Roe continues moving from position to position, carrying what medical supplies he can find and treating the wounded with whatever remains. He has no proper hospital, no reliable supply chain, and no guarantee that the next casualty can be saved. Yet he keeps going because there is nowhere else for the wounded to turn. The men of Easy Company remain surrounded in Bastogne, waiting for the next attack and knowing that the Germans have not given up. Their defensive line is thin, their supplies are running low, and the winter cold continues to take its toll. But they have stopped the offensive, refused surrender, and continued to hold. For the soldiers on the line, there is no certainty about what comes next. There is only the next artillery shell, the next wounded man, the next order, and the next foxhole. And somewhere among them, moving through the frozen darkness with his medical bag, Eugene continues doing what he can to keep the men alive.